My guest today truly needs no introduction, but here we go. He's generally regarded as one of the best defensive catchers in Major League Baseball history, and he wasn't too bad with the bat either. He's a six-time Rawlings Gold Glove winner, a three-time American League All-Star, and a world champion. He finished his 16-year career having caught more games than anyone in Major League Baseball history, a record which has since been broken. He stayed active in baseball after his retirement, serving as an instructor, a television announcer, and a front office executive for the Texas Rangers. He's an avid outdoorsman, a published author, and motivational speaker. And he's also, as we know him, a former Galesburg Silver Streak. Jim Sundberg, welcome to Galesburg in Focus.
Hey, Jay, great. Glad to be with you.
Yeah, glad. I guess you're joining us today, obviously via Zoom, and I hear you're in Arkansas today.
Yeah, doing a little grandparenting work up here. And so Jan and I are been up here all week. We're going home tomorrow, back to Texas, but been playing grandparenting.
Okay, that's not a bad job, right?
No, it's a great job.
Yeah. So let's go way back. If you close your eyes, flash back to your childhood, what's your earliest baseball memory of Galesburg, growing up in Galesburg?
Well, I grew up across from H.T. Custer, and one of the early memories was probably 4 or 5 years old, playing, taking batting practice with Dad, and then getting hit in the head, and getting hit in the head with a pitch and falling to the ground and kind of being dizzy. But fortunately, I ended up getting back up, and it didn't seem to bother me.
Okay. So obviously, Little League, where were you playing? What was your team? Who were your teammates back then?
Well, I was a Yankees. Willie Hyman was the manager, and my dad was actually the assistant coach. And I'm trying to remember some of my teammates. Mike Panther, Rod Standard, and a few others. There were more.
Yeah, a lot. That's a long time ago, right? So that would have been what, the early 60s then, or
late 50s?
Late 50s. Okay.
Yeah.
So were you always the best player on your team?
Probably. I think there was a case that'd be made for that, at least from my 10-year-old age and up, 10, 11, and 12 in Little League. I'm not sure about the 9-year-old league time. I played the outfield as a 9-year-old, and don't have a lot of memory of that, other than playing left field. But I would say even through junior high and high school, probably was, and obviously at the top at Iowa, being one of the top players on the club.
Yeah. How did you become a catcher? Were you always a catcher?
Since I was 10 years old, actually Willie, the Little League manager of the Yankees, said, "Who would like to catch?" And my dad said, "Jim will."
Didn't have a choice.
I was offered. I was put in the spot, and it ended up being a great decision.
Yeah, for sure. Did you play any other positions?
Played the outfield, and in high school, one year, my sophomore year in high school, Jeff Chase was the catcher, and so I played shortstop that year, my sophomore year in high school. Then I went back behind the plate. I was kind of a pitcher catcher until I got to be 16 years old, until I started high school. I normally was probably the best pitcher in the city, because my arm was my strength and I could throw a curveball early. And then when I got to high school, Bob Beal, the manager of the Silver Streaks, Galesburg Silver Streaks, didn't want he wanted pitchers just to pitch and not play other positions. And so I didn't pitch after that.
Okay. Where were you playing your games there? Where did the high school play back when you were playing?
I think it's where the softball field used to be.
Okay.
It was way out north, in the north of the school, in the field back there. We never had a fence. Okay. And we barely had a backstop, and barely had places to sit on the side for a dugout.
Yeah, Barry Cheeseman told me some stories there. I mean, if you hit it, then you could. There were probably quite a few inside the park homers back then.
Yeah, you had to run. You had to hit it hard over the outfielder's head and then run like a deer to get it inside the park.
Yeah. How were your teams back then? High school and Legion. How successful were you?
Well, we went. We actually had good teams. Uh, we made it to regionals my senior year. Actually, my best year was my junior year at Galesburg, and I think we were competitive, but we never. It was the teams right before I got to high school that actually went to state. One with Jesse Ponce was on, and I think they went to state. Mike Sturgeon when he was younger.
Okay. So, a lot of people listening today and watching will remember you, but there's that younger generation that's only read about you or heard about you. What does it mean to have your name on the baseball field here at Jim Sundberg Field?
Well, that's really special, and I'm sure you're right. Even in Texas, unless you're 50 years and older, you probably or 40 years and older, you're probably not aware. And the people that usually stop me in public were kids that I had visited their elementary school when they were in the kindergarten through sixth grade back in the mid-70s. I did about 90 programs in the the Metroplex area, Fort Worth, Arlington, Dallas. Put on 90 programs on baseball, and it's those kids who are now 50 years and older, and they'll stop me in public. But you're right. Time marches on pretty fast, and unless you're up there in years, you would not remember who Jim Sundberg is. I actually ran into a few kids the other day that had trouble telling me who Nolan Ryan and Ivan Rodriguez was. So it happens quick.
We are.
It happens quick.
Yes. So I don't know if you've heard this. They're talking about putting artificial turf on Sundberg Field. They're having some drainage problems. It's the original drainage system, and they need to replace the field anyway. So they're thinking it will be more economical and useful to do turf. Any opinion on turf fields these days?
Well, I think the turf fields are probably, from what I hear, turf is much better than it was back when I was playing. In fact, they eventually got rid of all the turf, and it in some places like Seattle that I remember that was really hard. Toronto, places where the turf was really hard on the legs. If you were in there for a 3 or 4 game series, you could tell it on your legs. And I'm probably not an artificial turf fan in terms of playing on it, but I know it makes sense economically for high schools and colleges.
Yeah, especially around here in the spring. You know what it's like in the spring, rain,
right,
especially in March and April and even into May. So I think they would have more opportunities to probably play, less rainouts and everything like that.
Right.
Yeah. So are you sticking on Galesburg? Are you surprised that Galesburg hasn't produced more major league players? I know it's obvious. It's not an easy thing, but are you surprised? Because, we've had some pretty good baseball here.
We have had good baseball. I think it's interesting. You mentioned that it's basically in the north, and there was a article I saw a few years ago, a Sports Illustrated article, or it might have been Sports Illustrated, and the article talked about most of the major league pitchers who have had 100 or more wins were from the north, and the hitters were from the south. They had 100 or more home runs were from the south, indicating that the window for playing is not as large in the north as it is in the south. And so being in Illinois, being in weather that's pretty compromising in the spring and fall, your window for playing is not as long. And I think the more you get the opportunity to play, the better off you can be. But Galesburg was 38,000, I think, when I was there. What is it, around 32,000 now?
Right around 30, yeah.
And they've had some guys that have been play pro ball and have been competitive, but it's just, I think if anything, it goes to show you how hard it is. Exactly. It's not an easy thing to do to make it to the big leagues. It takes being very gifted naturally, and then having a passion and a desire that goes beyond most anybody else. So it's not easy to make it, and there's been a few guys that make a run at it, but haven't been able to make it.
Right. Obviously, there was no such thing as travel baseball per se when you were a kid. What's your opinion of youth baseball today?
Well, I think if anything, I think for position players, it's really good. I think the problem that we even see running into at the major league level is the amount of innings that a 14-year-old may have on his arm in the years prior to being 14 years of age. Physically, at 14, the growth plates begin to close up, and you can actually put more stress on the arm after 14 years of age. But so many kids are pitching too much early that it's actually wearing the arms out more quickly, and then when they get to the big leagues, they really can't do as much as they used to. When I was playing in the big leagues in the 70s, it was, there were some guys that would pitch 300 innings. Now you got guys that are barely getting over 200 innings. Mm. And so even the game load that they have moved the game load down. A lot of arm injuries, a lot of elbow injuries, a lot of shoulder injuries. And I think it's due to the amount of innings that a young pitcher pitches. And so when I think of travel ball as a youngster, I think if I'm a parent, and my child's a gifted thrower, that I would be watching very carefully how many pitches he throws in a week.
Yeah, and there's also the aspect of travel ball. You're not playing with your own team, your own people that you go to school with. I mean, do you see any benefit or detraction of not being able to play with your teammates? Because like around here, if you're playing travel ball, you're playing with other kids, sometimes from the Quad Cities or Peoria. I mean, do you think there's something to be said for playing at home?
I think there's a benefit for playing with, getting used to playing with a certain group of people. Mm-hmm. I think there is a bit in that to get I kind of put a team together. When you're playing sporadically with other kids because you're playing on another team. Actually, in Texas, I've heard of a kid playing on 3 different teams, and so I think in that case you don't learn the real dynamics of team, and I think it can make a difference.
So you were drafted 3 times, including out of high school, I believe in the 6th round by the Oakland A's. When did you first know that you really had a chance to be a major leaguer?
It was my junior year at Galesburg. My junior year at high school was really good, and I think it was then that I began to hear people talking about it. I saw scouts starting to come around, and so it was. I knew there was some interest as a junior, and then as I moved into my senior year, and the scouts were still around, I knew that the chance of playing pro ball would be a reality someday. There was a game that we played in Canton, a double hitter, and I remember there was an article written that there was going to be a lot of scouts out that day, and as I recall, there was like 20 some scouts out basically to watch me play. And in the first game, I struck out 3 times, and everybody left except for one scout, an Oakland A's scout. Okay. And then I hit 2 home runs in the second game, and it turns out that out of high school, it was the Oakland A's that drafted me. Yeah. And so one game can make a difference, and it becomes an emotional, I think, experience even for scouts to watch a guy do well or watch him on the other end do poorly, and it kind of makes a mark on a person's mind.
Right. Kind of talk about, how did you end up at Iowa? What other opportunities did you have?
Well, Jay, that's a great question. I think I was geared to play pro baseball. My dad had kind of geared me to do it. College was really not something we were thinking about. And now, if you were, after having been in the front office with the Rangers and being a part of a major league draft, if you were going to be drafted in the 5th or 6th round today, you would probably have your pick of whatever college you wanted to go to.
Mhm.
There would be that much interest. And not only that much interest at the college level, but pro teams would be calling you days, weeks, months out, talking to you and asking you about what kind of money you're looking at, or checking up. There's a lot of checking up on players that go on today. But back in '69, when I graduated from Galesburg, and they had the draft in June, and also if you were drafted today, you would probably hear it on TV,
Right.
But back then, I didn't hear anything on draft day. In fact, it was 2 weeks later that I found out that I was drafted by the Oakland A's, and I found out by reading it in the sporting news. I
Nice.
never got a call. I never got a call from the Oakland A's. And today that's changed. You have so much time before you have to, a team needs a call. But here's what happened. I didn't have a college pursuing me. And so in August, I went to play a game in Iowa City. And it's my understanding that based on a letter of recommendation from my 2nd grade school teacher to the athletic department at Iowa, Dwayne Banks and Dick Schultz came out to the game that day in Iowa City. In fact, they didn't even have to leave town to go watch me. They just went down the street to the city park to watch me play. And to this day, it was the best single day that I ever had. And they offered me a scholarship after the game. It's the only offer I had, and that's how I ended up at Iowa. It was there was not much of a choice or a selection, but it was the best thing that happened to me.
Okay. So you were drafted in the first round by the Rangers in '73, I believe. Did you expect it? Were you pretty sure you were going to be a first round pick that year?
I knew it'd be a high pick. The summer before, I was drafted by the Rangers as well in the June draft, and the scout came in and took Janet and I out to lunch. And we were young, we've been married a year, I think, at that point in time. And he said to me, basically, Jim, you can't hit, you can't catch. Everything you throw into center field. You're never going to make it to the big leagues, but I'll give you a chance for 6,000. Well, I was kind of upset with that, and ended up going and playing with the Peoria Pacers that summer, and did well. And then so the draft that you're talking about in January of '73,
Okay.
when I was the 2nd pick in the draft, I knew it was going to be high. And when I found out the Rangers had drafted me again, I found it rather confusing, because I thought to myself, well, how anybody who would think guys isn't that good, why would you keep drafting them? Well, I didn't know at the time that the technique that scouts use were to make you feel so bad about your game that you would sign for anything.
Mm-hmm.
I called up the scout came in, made an offer that was better than the previous summer. I picked up the phone, talked to a guy that I played for one summer in Colorado, Sam Simplizio, and he basically gave me terrific advice. He said, Jim, don't negotiate anymore with the scout. Call up the farm director and tell him that you love to play for the Rangers, but you need a little extra money and an incentive bonus, and my college paid for if I want to go back. And he said, but the Rangers, you could probably move up fast because the Rangers don't have any catching. He was familiar with professional baseball, and he knew the Rangers organization. And so I called up the farm director, did what he said. I signed and started my career with the Rangers at that time. And so his advice turned out good. It worked out because in a year I was in the big leagues.
Say you did move up really quick. I mean, you're drafted in '73, and then the next year, '74, you're catching in the major leagues, and you caught 132 games. That's a pretty quick rise for back then.
Well, and Jay, I went to AA ball that year. So I went from college to AA to the big league in 1 year. Billy Martin saw me play in instructional league in the fall of '73. And at that time, I guess he decided I would be his catcher. He didn't tell me that. I wish he would have, but I went home that winter and put compressors in the back of refrigerators at Admiral for
Okay.
2 months. And so I started my squatting early, and by putting compressors in the back of refrigerators, and I went to the big leagues the next year and found out that
Yeah.
heard then that they really wanted me to be their big league catcher, and what helped that a lot, Dick Billings, who had been the catcher the year before, hurt his knee early in the season on a play at the plate and was out, and so I ended up, as you mentioned, catching over 130 games my first year.
What made you one of the best defensive catchers in baseball history? I mean, arm strength, pitch calling, receiving, combination. What was your claim to fame, do you think?
I think initially it was the arm and the hands and the feet, my ability to move quickly behind the plate, my quickness in getting the ball to the second base, the accuracy of my throws, and my game calling would take some time. That would be the last thing that would come into line. But I made it basically on my glove and what I did with my glove and my arm, and just naturally gifted to do that. My mom said I took after her, so I never did go against that.
Okay. This is Jay Redfern. I'm talking to Galesburg native and former longtime Major League catcher Jim Sundberg. So you'll obviously forever be known as a Texas Ranger. You're a member of the Hall of Fame. But tell us about your time in Kansas City when you helped lead the Royals to the World Series championship in 1985. How'd you end up in Kansas City?
Well, Jay, I had left Texas the year before and went to Milwaukee in '84, and Harry Dalton, the general manager of Milwaukee, had said to me that, Jim, we got you to kind of bridge the gap between now and when Bill Schroeder, a young catcher in their minor league system, is ready to play in the big leagues. And I said, well, I appreciate you saying so. So I knew there was a guy coming up that they wanted to be the catcher. And it was kind of a year of recovery for me in '84. I went to the All-Star game and got out of the heat, went to the All-Star game. But in August, I hurt my back and was on the DL for the first and only time in my career. I was out about three and a half weeks. And they brought up Bill Schroeder, and Bill hit like 8 home runs in that 3.5 weeks I was gone. And I'm going like, my gosh, I'm going to go from being the only all-star on the Brewer club to sitting on the bench. But the day before I came back off the disabled list, he got hurt and was out the rest of the year. And I played the rest of the year. So what I did at the end of the season, I knew that they probably weren't going to sit me on the bench. They'd probably trade me. So what I did is I exercised my option to be traded, as I could being a 10-year plus player. So by exercising my option to be traded, that narrowed then the total number of teams, I think was 28, down to 12. And I would give the Milwaukee Brewers the names of 12 teams that they could trade me to. And one of them was Kansas City. Well, I hear in January of '85 that the Royals want me to manage a young pitching staff, and I heard that in the beginning of one week, and by the end of that week, they had said that Dick Hauser wanted me to be on the team, thought that I would make a big influence on the young staff, give them a chance to run at the World Series. And so I went to Kansas City in January of '85, and then that's how I got there, and spent a couple of great years.
I was going to say, did you know at the time that team was capable of winning a World Series?
Well, once I got to spring training and I saw the team, I thought this is a team that's got a chance. We were 7 games, I think, back at the All-Star break, and we really had gelled at that time. And I was talking to George Orta, who was on the team, and he said to me one afternoon, he says, "We're going to win this thing, Jim." I go, we are? And he goes, "Yeah, we're going to win this." And all of a sudden, we just started putting it together. We caught California the first week of September and kind of went back and forth for a couple of weeks. And then I think we didn't win it until 2 days left in the season. Did we clinch the I'm trying to think of our division, and then we went on to play the Toronto Blue Jays.
Okay, so this is a hard question coming from a Cardinals fan, but let's forward to Game 6.
Yeah,
You score the winning run in that still famous Game 6 win over the Cardinals. Kind of tell us how that inning unfolded.
well, actually, it started back. There was runners at first and second, nobody out, and Dick Hauser had me bunt, and I bunted an okay ball down the third base line, but it wasn't close enough to the line, and the pitcher came off the line. The pitcher came off the mound and threw it to third base and got an out at third base. So that put me at first, and then there was a wild pitch. Went to second. They end up walking Hal McRae. So I'm standing, Jay, at second base, and I'm looking in dugout because I'm thinking, well, maybe he's going to pitch run for me. I've got to be thinking about that at least. I mean, I used to have really good wheels, but in my 14th season, it was a 13th season. It was beginning to the wheels were beginning to go on me, you know. And but I finally decided that Dick Hauser was not going to get a pitch runner, that I was going to have to stay in there. And so I just went through the checklist on everything that you need to do, you know, get a good lead, get a good jump on the ball, in other words, read the ball off the bat well, know where it's going, if it's going to be caught or drop as soon as it's hit, cut the base at third base, cut it well, and then respond to the catcher when you get to home plate. And so Dane Orge was the hitter. I got a great jump. I got a good lead, a great jump, read the ball well off the bat, knew it was going to fall in. Ball was hit to Andy Van Slyke, who's got a gun in right field. And I cut the base at third, headed home. And Darrell Porter made the mistake of coming out in front of home plate too far. And so that allowed me to slide to the far side of home plate with the winning run. And so, and you know, as a Cardinal fan, I will say, you know, George Orta was out at first base. They had replays today where you can look at it, he would have been out. But what I usually tell Cardinal fans is that instead of my run being the winning run, it would have been the tying run, and no one would have known who won the game. So, but if you add that Jack Clark dropped the ball over at first base by the dugout, if he catches that ball and Orta's out, then the Cardinals win.
So,
but you know how baseball goes.
Yeah, looks like we have a little bit of a bad connection here, but so, you know, everyone says you can't beat a Game 7 in baseball. What were your emotions like? We've talked about this before. What were your emotions like going into Game 7?
Well, it was very interesting. It was the most stressful day outside the ballpark that I had in my career. We had a house full of family members, and Janet said, "Why don't we grab the kids and go and take a lunch and go to the park, one of Kansas City's beautiful parks?" And so we did, and that helped to relieve some of the stress. My dad was there, and I felt like he was getting ready to play the game. That's how bad he was, and he was all uptight and nervous. So I got away from that, and I was sitting there and kind of pondering, thinking about the game. And Janet asked me what's going on. I said, you know, I really think tonight's going to be a blowout, but I don't really know which way it's going to go. I just don't have the feel for that, but I sense that there's going to be a blowout. And so once I got to the park, all the nervousness went away, and I was able to settle in emotionally. Then Brett Saberhagen went out and took the mound for the first inning, and he was so good the first inning, so poised and so throwing the ball so hard and had such great control. I came back into the dugout in the bottom of the first when we would go up to hit. I told Dick Hauser, the manager, I said, if we score 1 run today, we're going to win this game. That's how good Saberhagen is. Well, by the 5th inning, we were up 11-0, and that's the way the game would end. And so the last 4 innings, I thought about my little league days in Galesburg. I thought about how cool it was, thinking about as a kid playing in the 7th game of a World Series in the big leagues, and we started the celebration actually in the 5th inning because the TV station was setting up the locker room for the broadcast, and we would go up and watch them set up, and we were just giving ourselves high fives and kind of giggling. And then of course we'd be serious. We'd come back into the dugout and be serious because we had a good opponent, and if you give them any edge, they might come back and be able to win that thing. But as it turned out, we were able to shut them out and have a tremendous celebration.
So, some of baseball's greatest players never won a World Series. What did winning a World Series mean for you and your legacy? I mean, even life after baseball, would your career have been remembered the same if you didn't win a World Series?
I don't think so. I think it solidifies winning. I think for me, you wonder as you're playing and you're not on a winning team, is there something I could be doing better or different that could help the team win? And am I and sometimes the thought goes through your head is, am I the reason we're not winning? And so to win and to be on a team that does win, you realize how much of a team effort it takes all around. We were not a team that scored a lot of runs. In fact, I think we scored just under 700 runs for the season as a team. Now, to bring that into perspective, most of the teams today are scoring like 900 runs. And in the steroid era, they were up to 1,000 runs. But we won a lot of close games. We won a lot of 2-1, 3-2, 4-3 games. But we had guys that could catch the ball. We had a good pitching staff, and we won the close games. So to win the World Series, it's such a thrill because it forever plants in your head, you played on a winning team. You played on one of the best teams. And I happened to have a good postseason. I didn't hit high for average, but I think in the playoffs, I had the most RBIs on the team. And I think in the World Series, I had the most runs scored. And so it was something like that. It may have been the reverse of that. But anyway, it was a good series for me, and both playoff and series, and one that's always thought of fondly.
Yeah, I was going to ask how often you wear your ring, but I think you're wearing it today. I think I saw you kind of flashing. There it is.
I have it on there. Yeah, there it is. Not like the one the Rangers just got. It's
Yeah.
probably the Rangers just got one twice the size.
Yeah.
But yes, it's a memory, a good memory, and it's an acknowledgement of being on a pretty good team.
Yeah. This is Jay Redfern. I'm talking to Galesburg native and former longtime major leaguer Jim Sundberg. How did you know it was time to retire, and what was it suddenly like when you're done? You're not playing for the first time since you were a kid, basically. How hard was it to retire?
It's not an easy thing. A couple of things. One is, when I was traded from Kansas City to Chicago, it started the downside of my career. I had been the starting catcher for 13 years. And then when I went to Chicago, I was sitting on the bench. So 3 years of spending a lot of time on the bench really began to prepare me. But I also knew I couldn't catch, 140 games a year anymore. I just physically was too demanding to really kind of do that. So those things began to prepare, I guess you could say, your heart for leaving the game. And I was always wondered what I was going to be doing when I was through. I mean, that was kind of a scary thing. What are you going to do? You've been playing baseball your whole life. What's next? And with 2 weeks left in the season,
not like you're making $20 million a year back then either.
Right, exactly. And even then, I mean, you can have a lot of money and be kind of miserable if you don't have something to kind of pour yourself into. And I was sitting in the dugout, and Bobby Valentine came to me and said, well, the cable network that does the Ranger games, they'd like to have you come up and broadcast during the game in uniform. And I talked to Tom Grieve, the general manager, and he says, if you want to do that, we'll let you do that. And I had not been playing. Bobby Valentine did not really start me the last 6 weeks of the season. And so that was another thing that the time is coming. And I said, well, yeah, I'd love to do that. And so in the second inning in uniform, I would run up to the broadcast booth, as long as I was back down in the dugout in the eighth inning in case they wanted to use me as a pitch hitter. And so for 7 innings, from the second inning to the eighth inning, I would run up to the broadcast booth, do the game, and go back. And then they asked me after about a week, they said, how would you like to have the broadcast job next year? And I said, I'd love that. And so that's how I got to broadcast 6 years after I got through playing. It was a good transition to leave the field. And I broadcasted about 100 games a year and started my transition away from baseball.
Let's talk about today's game a little bit. You know, Spencer Strider, Garrett Cole, Justin Verlander, the list goes on. There's a lot of pitcher injuries these days. What do you attribute to? That's just not coincidence, is it?
I don't think it is. I think with them pitching less innings, again, I go back to what I said earlier about youth baseball. I think there's, it used to be that there wasn't that many games. When I was in Galesburg, I played 15 games and I pitched some of those games. But as time went on and you started having travel ball and you started having more games, someone needed to pitch it. And so I believe, and I believe the statistics show it, that a lot of the injuries that we see today are injuries that are done much earlier in life, but they don't come to the top to see and experience until they're later on in life. And so that's my firm belief that pitchers that come to the big leagues have generally probably already put a lot of innings on their arms and can't take a whole lot. I have a friend, the orthopedic specialist for the Rangers, Keith Meister, who does basically elbows. He's got his hands full. He said everybody's coming to him in Major League Baseball. And he was the one that sent me the article about hitters come from the north. I mean, pitchers come from the north and hitters come from the south, indicating that if you've got less games to play, you're probably better off living and you pitch, you're better off living in the north. Whereas you want to be a position player, you're probably better off playing more games in the south. So I think it comes down to the amount of innings that a youngster puts on his arm at a young age.
Okay. Who would be on your Mount Rushmore of greatest catchers of all time?
Well, Johnny Bench, it's a great question. Johnny Bench, Ivan Rodriguez, and Bill Dickey.
Okay.
And people will ask me that question. I say this. I had the fortunate opportunity. I met Bill Dickey in Cooperstown in '86, and we struck up a relationship that we had for years after that. And he wanted to know about how to pitch hitters like Reggie Jackson, and I wanted to know about Babe Ruth and Ty Cobb and all those guys. And we kept the relationship going for years. And then one day I got a call from his wife, and he had passed away. She asked me if I wanted to be a pallbearer at the funeral, and I said I sure would. So I went into Little Rock. She took me to their house after the funeral, and there was a trophy in his cabinet from President Eisenhower said the best catcher the first 50 years of baseball. And so that got my mind to thinking, you know, it really is generationally. He was probably the best catcher the first 50. Johnny Bench the next 50, and then Ivan Rodriguez. But for me, being a kid, I think the best catcher was Johnny Bench. I think he's at the top of the list. There's some other great catchers, and I played what I think in the golden era of catching with Carlton Fisk and Bob Boone and Gary Carter, Tony Pena, Manny Sanguillen. I mean, the list goes on. The number of really
Ted
good
Simmons,
catchers that caught in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, Ted Simmons up there. Maybe not
Ted
the greatest
Simmons,
defenses. Yeah,
Ted Simmons, another one. Yes.
Yeah. What do you think makes catchers great managers?
Probably because they've had to take a look at the whole field while they're playing, and you know, I've had some teammates say the best way to learn the game is to pitch or catch, and so you learn the game really well in those two positions, and so catchers have been known to manage, and I think it has a lot to do with just the constant involvement in the game. You can't relax, you can't sit back, and some of the things that it takes as a manager, you're never out of the game. You're constantly thinking and in the game, and I think those things go hand in hand.
Okay. How about let's finish with a little rapid fire round. I'm going to say something, and you give me your first thing that comes to your mind. Best pitcher you ever faced?
Best pitcher I ever faced, Mark Parrott.
Wow. Okay.
I couldn't get a ball past pitcher's mound on him. He was a Seattle no-name.
I remember the name. Yeah. How about the best pitcher you ever caught?
Ferguson Jenkins.
Okay. Best player you ever played against?
Against would probably be Reggie Jackson.
Okay. How about your sports hero growing up?
Ernie Banks.
Okay. Favorite major league stadium that you played in?
Fenway in Boston.
Okay.
Wrigley Field in Chicago.
Okay. How about least favorite?
Oakland.
For what reason? Just
we stayed in a terrible place. Not much of a fan following. It was chilly, even in the middle of summer, and it was just in a bad place of town.
Okay.
And the stadium was bad. The locker room was bad.
Yeah. Well, they're finally leaving in a few after this year, I guess.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. How about if you wouldn't have been a baseball player, you would have been?
I learned later on in life I like being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I don't know if I learned that early, but entrepreneurship, I like that. I've thought about insurance too, being a salesman in insurance, having an insurance business.
Yeah. Maybe you could have partnered up with Mike White, huh?
Yes, I could have.
Okay. Finally, how about Galesburg? What's Galesburg mean to you?
Well, it's home. I think about that. I'll be back for the reunion this August, and it'll be the second time this year, with both parents being gone now, and not really. I do have an aunt and uncle and some cousins that live around there, but they're, for the most part, parents, siblings are gone out of Galesburg, but there's a lot of friendships. So when I think of Galesburg, I think of home and friendship.
Okay. That's Jim Sundberg, Galesburg's most accomplished professional athlete. Jim, you've been a sense of pride for Galesburg for decades, so it was great to talk a little baseball with you today on Galesburg in Focus.
Well, Jay, I enjoyed it. Great questions, and it's great to see you again.
Okay. Thanks, Jim. Take care.
All right.